Welcome to the Blue Aces podcast. That is my company, where we explore AI and how it's reshaping industries and accelerating innovation. I'm your host, Jack Vidic, and today I am joined by Rebecca Lyons at Exera as well as Hersay on the Blue Aces podcast. So welcome.
Thanks so much, Jack.
Appreciate it. Just want to kick it off and wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your background and your journey that you've had so far that actually led you to hopping on the podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is primarily in sales and marketing, actually. I've worked in a number of different industries. I have worked in startup before, a lot of logistics, a little bit of automotive, so a little all over the place. I've managed organizations with both local and global reach. Um, it's been a journey, I would say. My sort of studies were psychology and human resource management, though I'm almost finished my MBA now. And what sort of took me onto this entrepreneurial path was a few different sort of life experiences that I had had. So with Exera being HR analytics, trying to look at all of the data sources that HR has access to better improve the way that employee experience operates within the workforce. So, looking at performance management as an example and having the ability to use a data-driven approach to making sure that we're recognizing folks that are top performers. When it comes to Hersay, my latest venture, it's a women's health app. Through my experience navigating the healthcare system, trying to help other women navigate that with confidence and feel heard when they're at the doctors. Um, Sort of a fast and furious journey. I actually started my maternity leave and then 4 months in, started to think, I think there's a little more out there for me. And that's when sort of the wheel started turning. Shortly thereafter, I started Exera Solutions, and then several months after that, started Hersay. And I think I've been really fortunate to tap into a lot of the startup ecosystem, both in Canada and the US, for lots of inspirational connections, lots of wonderful chats, and with the very quick moving development in the field of AI, as I'm sure you're familiar with, that's really informed how we're really quickly moving forward with both ventures.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It sounds like you have kind of like me, a bunch of like broad experience that hey, you've kind of wiggled your way into what you're doing now. And yeah, the fact that you have kind of involvement in two separate companies that seem like they are just totally different from each other. I think that's fantastic. And even looking at like the Hersay, excuse me, website, I just thought of like a specific story with a friend of mine who, yeah, she was dealing with a medical issue for months and months, if not years, where yeah, she couldn't figure out what was going on and went to so many doctors. And it sounds like, oh, that would be a great, app or technology that she could have used that would have helped maybe figure out things a little bit faster. I'm sure you have some stories yourself, and we can get into that in a bit. But no, yeah, they both seem like very, very interesting products, services, businesses, and yeah, appreciate you sharing. So cool. Well, moving forward, just wanted to focus, I guess, kind of on some of the trends that you've seen across both industries, really. I know they're both, I would say, technology based, which is helpful for me. But when you zoom out and kind of look at the wider technology space, we'll say, are there any like major trends or shifts that you're seeing that you feel like are going to shape the industry moving forward that you should be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you're well aware, AI is kind of at the forefront right now for all conversations to do with any type of innovation in any organization. I think there's going to be a lot of education around what that is and what that means, how to implement it in an effective way. It's, I think, still a little early to sort of throw all of your eggs in that basket. I think you really need to be operating relatively efficiently as a business already to truly leverage the power. Because if your processes aren't repeatable enough, or if you haven't got robust training, it's a little bit difficult. We've seen in the space of healthcare, for example, ensuring that data sets that AI is using is something that's credible and relevant and not just found on Joe Blow's blog, right? So I think there's going to be a little bit around governance as well in various areas. I know Switzerland released their legislation recently, and it looks um, quite interesting in contrast with some of the other countries, such as the US. So I'm really curious to see how that shapes up, because that will certainly impact how, especially global organizations, are able to leverage and utilize AI, right?
For sure. I'm curious if you can elaborate, just because I'm not familiar with, like, I think you said Switzerland's governance and their
Mhm.
policies. Like, what makes them different, or what have you read that you feel like is different for them versus the US or other countries?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it has to do with how the data is sourced, making sure that's sourced ethically and that where it's coming from, whichever sources are aware, making sure the consumer is very well informed that information being provided is from AI. Of course, being in the EU, there's more protective measures around data security and data privacy, right? So there's things like that that are of consideration. And so it's regulating in the way of making sure that the consumer is protected um, when exploring, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of work that we can do for example, children having access to these tools, right? Like there really isn't any gates in place current state. And I think that we can do some work on in areas such as that. And I think sort of they're setting the example as to what that type of governance could look like in order to make sure that we're protecting our best interests, right?
For sure. I think it's interesting. I mean, obviously, like a very, very simple example, but it's like, hey, if I Google something, it might be like sports stats, or I think of sports all the time. I'm a big sports guy. Yeah, it's like, hey, if you Google some stats, like maybe they'll be from 2022, maybe they'll be from 2023, and they're not like up to date with what you want. Like they might be relevant in some sense, but they're not really checked, and it's just a little bit of a free for all. And yeah, I think you're right. I think it's moving so fast that it's tough for people to actually create like laws and regulations around it, just because of how fast it's moving and how fast it's changing on a week to week, month to month, year to year scale. So yeah, no, definitely, yeah, very, very interesting, and I think we'll all yeah, see in the near future how that kind of shapes up.
Absolutely.
I know you had mentioned, hey, education, for a lot of people being kind of a big issue. Is there anything you feel like specifically, people within the technology space right now, or maybe like early, small businesses, like either misunderstand or underestimate about AI in the workspace?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I think AI it's a really great tool that you can leverage to move a little bit more quickly within your business, especially as a startup where you've got more flexibility in how you utilize and roll things out. You don't, have to touch too many people to get things moving. You can get it working for you relatively quickly. Um, so I think that it would be you would do a disservice to yourself if you ignored it altogether, right? And you didn't use it at all. We know that actually data shows women and underrepresented communities are less likely to adopt AI or aren't as adopting it as quickly. And so I think that there's more work that could be done to just make sure that if we're going to be using this tool, how can everybody have access to that and the information to leverage it in an effective way that's relevant for you, right? So I would really like for people to explore and read up and understand, there's more out there than just ChatGPT. There's lots of tools that may help you. Um, at the same time, if we're using those GPT models, know that it's possible for them to hallucinate or provide you with incorrect information, because at this point in time, there isn't a fact checker, right, built in. It's not only looking at credible sources. So take what it says with a grain of salt. It is really designed to reward you using it. So it's quite engaging and very positive, which can be great, but also have establish a bit of a false sense of um, it. You thinking
Oh,
that it knows what it's talking about,
I totally agree. I think it's, I don't know, maybe this is me. Not that I feel like I'm that old, but not part of like the youngest generations where like they've always had, computers and cell phones and access to everything like so fast. And so I don't know if like, hey, maybe their just trust of technology is higher than mine. Like I feel like I see a lot of stuff and I'm just, maybe I'm too skeptical. But I agree in just that, yeah, it can make a lot of your processes a lot more efficient and simplified and save you time or give you back time, just with, yeah, implementing tools out there. So yeah, appreciate you sharing. Um, I did want to ask if hey, looked 5 years down the future, or we were having this conversation on another podcast in 5 years. Curious what you think kind of the technology space would look like, and what parts might be different, what parts might be the same.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think there's going to be a lot more development in sort of like the blockchain and Web3 space. Some of the deep tech. We're going to start to see a very quick evolution in other areas, sort of outside of what feels very tangible to the consumer. Um, but for the regular person, I think that there's going to be a very different way that we're interacting with our technology, right? I think as we start to get used to these virtual assistants, right? We've had Siri for some time now, but Siri can do a lot more now than Siri could do a few years ago. So imagine that 5 years in the future. I know Apple just released their AirPods that translate in real time, right? Translate other languages in real time. Quite cool, right? So I really think that we're leaning into a lot of the great use of technology. I don't know what it's going to look like specifically, but I do think that the way we interact is going to look a little different.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's something that we're all kind of curious about because again, I think a few years ago it was like very early stages and was really cool, but it wasn't very sophisticated. And even again, going back 2, 3 years to where we are today, it's like, oh my god, it's massively different. And I'm out here in LA and we have, self-driving cars that you can take
Yeah,
instead of an Uber, and yeah, all that stuff to me is just so cool, and it's adapting so fast that yeah, 5 years from now I have no idea what it'll look like, but definitely an exciting time for sure.
absolutely.
Awesome. I guess we can dive into yourself and your businesses, I guess, but I don't know if you wanted to tell me a little bit more about Exera, per se, both. So what do you do for them, and like a little bit more on what those products or services can provide to their users.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I'm the CEO of both organizations, actually, Exera and Hersay. And both, though they're in different sectors, actually have very similar concepts when it comes to relying on data. So, first, I'll talk a little bit about Hersay. It's an AI-powered women's health app to support women with navigating their healthcare journey. So, that looks like, you log your symptoms in there, it'll identify trends in those symptoms and help to translate those to a script that you can go to speak with your doctor so that you actually get an outcome out of that appointment, whether that's a diagnosis or a treatment plan or both. We're trying to empower that patient experience and facilitate better communication with practitioners with that app. Um,
As
AI
opposed
comes in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as opposed to like me going in and not knowing anything about my symptoms and having to like fully rely on, which obviously, okay, you hope your doctor's good enough and they know what they're talking about and ask you all the right questions and relevant questions. But yeah, I think a lot of people don't know what they don't know, and so they don't know what to ask. And yeah,
For
this
sure.
sounds like a great use case for that, to just help people and women specifically feel more comfortable in those conversations.
Absolutely. And the example I like to give is there's a big difference showing up in that appointment and saying, yeah, I've been kind of tired lately. My stomach's been bugging me, versus actually having the data to show I've logged moderate to extreme
Yeah,
fatigue for 3 months straight and I'm having IBS symptoms alongside that, right? Those are two very different conversations and different pieces of data to provide to your care provider so that they can understand what your experience is and how that's impacting your life, right? Um, you can also follow up on a treatment plan. So if they prescribe a medication or other type of treatment, if you log how you're feeling on that new treatment plan, you're able to come back to them and tell them if it's working or not in a more tangible way than, yeah, I think so.
I feel a little bit better, so let's continue and see what's
Yeah,
happening in another 3 months. So yeah, no,
exactly.
that sounds great.
Yeah, exactly. And then with Exera Solutions, we're pulling together all the data points that HR teams and finance teams have access to in this is more of a business sense. Looking at analyzing that data and then calling out trends that may impact that organization. That may look like predicting employee churn, right? If we see several factors of employee data have been impacted, perhaps the employee sentiment within a department has dropped, perhaps the performance has also dropped. Maybe you're getting other pieces of information to show that department isn't doing so well. You can proactively get ahead of that with that information rather than waiting for that churn to happen, right? From a financial side, using the information to understand where the organization's at and then what levers you can turn and pull to do a predictive analysis on if we made changes here, what might happen there.
Cool. Yeah, no, that sounds very interesting and a very helpful tool, honestly. Especially again, just to be. I think a lot of people are trying to be proactive as opposed to reactive,
Yeah,
and it's like, yeah, that is a great use case for that, as opposed to waiting for something bad to happen and then having to adjust on the fly. And yeah, I think people just want to be as prepared as possible because you never really know what's going to happen. So
exactly.
sounds awesome. Um, I was curious if you had any like real examples of how a customer has used either Hersay or Exera. I feel like Exera Solutions would be more on the business side, and Hersay would be more on like an individual side. But if there are any like real world examples that you have that you wanted to just share of the positive impact of those
Yeah,
products?
yeah. Absolutely. So, um, I'll use Hersay because that's fresh in my mind. We had one of our beta users testing it out, and they have been experiencing symptoms for over a year. They were tracking kind of how they felt. They had like a written diary, but they weren't really using it on a regular basis, right? So they'd have some symptoms. They may or may not log them. It was pretty inconsistent. So they were working with their doctor to try to figure out what was going on. But I think just the challenge was keeping the data relevant, consistent, and in one place. And she was able to determine that she actually had a food sensitivity, right? She had done the allergy test, nothing had really come up, but it turned out after continually logging symptoms alongside her diet, hey, turns out that I'm not doing well with bell peppers, right? Whatever the case is. So, yeah, definitely having some outcomes like that. Another user um, received actually a PCOS diagnosis. Polycystic ovarian syndrome is something that affects women. And yeah, she had again, the symptoms tend to be masking as like other issues, right? Other syndromes as well. So by keeping track of when they were happening throughout her cycle, she was able to actually come to the diagnosis of PCOS. So that's why we're doing this. We want to improve women's health outcomes, and we love the success stories that our users are providing to us.
Yeah, no, it sounds like hey, it's a useful tool, and also probably makes you feel good that you are actually
Absolutely.
helping people in like a real real use case. That's great. I guess I'm just curious. So when they're going through it, is it almost like a journal that they log? Are there like notifications to remind them of like when they have symptoms, when they don't? Is it like a daily check-in? I'm just again trying to understand for myself.
Yeah.
If I or somebody in my life was using this, like what that process would look like if I had access to her.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely a daily check-in of how your symptoms are. We look at sort of mental and physical health. We try to be as holistic as we can because we know that different systems impact different things with our bodies. So from there, with that daily reminder, you check in with how things are going. It may give you some feedback as to how you may alleviate those symptoms, not from a medical, situation, but more, hey, if you're having headaches, maybe consider increasing your water intake and taking a rest, right? So some general wellness tips may be in there. And then again, calling out the trends in those symptoms within the app to say, hey, like, you've been logging migraines on a pretty regular basis. You may want to bring that up with your doctor, right? Sometimes it gets away from us, right? Life is busy. We tend not to prioritize our health, and kind of a reminder to make sure that wellness is a priority.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. I can relate in myself, not from like the medical standpoint, but even like trying to meditate or journal more often. And it's like, okay, how do I stick to that a little bit more? And yeah, I think having like a reminder or something to want me to keep going sounds like, hey, you have at least a good plan with that, that again makes people want to go back to the service and use it and keep track of it. And then obviously, if they, hey, I get a positive diagnosis that they now understand why they have symptoms,
Yeah,
I think that is, yeah, fantastic at the end of the day. So,
absolutely.
great. Yeah, appreciate you sharing. Kind of a similar question, but I was curious if you have any like, hey, very proud moments of yourself in terms of like impact or outcomes that you've seen in your short time in your businesses.
Yeah. Honestly, I think just pursuing them in the first place. It takes a lot to push yourself outside of your comfort zone and put yourself out there. I'm sure, Jack, you're finding this with the launch of your podcast, right? Like, it's our egos get in our way, our feelings get in our way. We're so afraid to put ourselves out there, and so I'm just proud of the fact that I am doing it.
You are totally right in that I can relate to that 100%. I have kind of a business partner who helps and mentors me a little bit, and I ask her, "Hey, how am I doing? Like, is there anything else I need to do?" And I kind of overstressed for myself, but she's like, no, you're doing great. You're doing everything you're supposed to. And obviously that helps me like calm down. But yeah, it's that initial risk, I think, is like the biggest step. And then after that, not that it becomes easy, but it's like, hey, that's the hardest part, is taking that
Yeah.
first step and going from there. And yeah, I think again, talking to like my dad, that he's always like, yeah, you've just always been so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
And whether that's, I'm sure, for a million reasons, it's like, hey, you treat yourself ideally the way that you treat your best friend, and you're kind and
Yeah.
positive. And yeah, sometimes we don't talk to ourselves that way. So
Exactly.
yeah, try to be a little bit easier on myself. But yeah, it's always good to have a reminder. So I appreciate it. Awesome. Well, just continuing on with a few other questions, I guess, that I had. Um, with, and again, take your pick. If you want to talk about both, that's fine. I'm just curious if there's anything that you would say really differentiates either of your businesses from other products on the market. And frankly, I'm not really familiar with other products in those spaces, so you might be hopefully a little bit more than I am. But yeah, if you had any thoughts there, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for Hersay, I would say there's many symptom tracking apps out there that tend to focus on one particular niche. So it's either on for women's health, it's on your menstrual health only. If maybe only on your diet tracking, right? There's very niche products, but not many look more holistically at how things are going. And none of them actually support that or facilitate that visit with your doctor and tracking the outcome of that visit. So I think we're actually one of the first for sure, exploring that connection, that more look at the full circle and how are we going to ensure that women actually get the outcomes that they deserve when it comes to their health. Um, as far as Exera goes, I think the way that our analytics operates is a little different than what exists in the market, in the sense that we're not only analyzing the data set, we're looking at trends in potentially otherwise unrelated data sources to deliver actionable results and recommendations using AI. So rather than just having a chart or a graph for all of these different pieces, having that more interactive, like, hey, I noticed in your engineering team, you may have some pay equity challenge here. You've got some employees at this band, you've got some employees at this band. You want to reward your performers and keep them with the organization. Here are the steps that I recommend you take to do that, right? So I haven't found tools that have that approach of using AI in a very like step by step way to tell the person what to do about what they're seeing,
Yeah,
right?
no, I think that's important because I think a lot of whatever it might be, a lot of hey, it's like hey, if I have a budget and okay, I can go buy these tools and you implement them and it's great. But like, what do you do with them? It's like now that I
Exactly.
have them, do they actually provide me value, or can I just say, well, I have this tool, and so that I think does this, but you're not really sure. And so yeah, I think
Exactly.
the like actionable insights is yeah very very important, and yeah probably something that does help you guys stand out. So
For sure.
fantastic. Um, was curious, since obviously both of your businesses seems like are pretty new. Um, Curious like how you see them evolving, specifically in the kind of tech related question,
Yeah,
over the next couple of years.
definitely. So I'll start with Hersay. I think that women's health is having a moment right now, right? The um, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation just announced all of the funding for women's health. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for that investment. It's been an underserved sort of segment of the market for such a long time, and it's well overdue for innovation. So I see there being an exponential growth trajectory on that front. That will probably look like going beyond our direct to consumer app and integrating into some B2B as well. How can we allow for market reach outside of just the consumer? um, likely partnering with, anything from employers and insurers from the health
Yeah, that's
benefit
what I was
space,
thinking. I was like, that'd
right?
be a great way to get in. Is yeah, if you offer this additional coverage as
Exactly. Well,
employee or within a business insurance,
for sure.
because yeah, I think that would also just give you obviously a much wider base to reach.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, if we can reduce absenteeism by even just 1 day per employee per year, like there is exponential return for the organizations on that front. Plus, outside of the economic, we're helping people feel better, right? So it's a twofold thing. I think also setting up our marketplace to connect medical and perimedical practitioners with women as well who may not realize that their insurance or their benefits cover some services, right? Like, use what you have available to help yourself feel well. Prevent that emergency room visit, right? Go to your physio or do what you need to do to help yourself get better sooner. So I see a big sort of partnership aspect in that area. There's more, I think, that we could explore in that realm, but as we get further down the line, I think women will tell us where they want to go, right? We're very user informed with our product research and our design.
Yeah, that's great. I honestly just kind of relate to the one point of like, well, hey, I have this giant, medical coverage for my insurance plan,
Yeah.
but I think there's so many parts of it that like I am not familiar with. I don't know how to actually go about using those benefits. Like, when can I use them? How often can I use them? And I feel like those documents sometimes are so big and lengthy, and I'm just like, okay, I know I have my normal medical coverage. I'll deal with it when I deal with it. But you're right, probably so much that I could be more proactive about to, yeah, make me feel better maybe now, as opposed to, yeah, waiting to go to the emergency room for major issues when they pop up. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's definitely a good point for sure.
absolutely.
I did want to kind of move forward into a little bit of like growth and your journey and some challenges that you've seen in your time in these businesses. But with yeah, either and if you want to recap like where you currently are, what stage you are right now, and was curious like what do you think your growth will look like in the next 12 months or so?
Yeah. So I think I'll use Hersey as the example because it's a little newer and just sort of talking through that. I think some of the listeners might appreciate if they're entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. So Hersey is a relatively new organization. We started up in May of 2025, so just a few months ago. And I really made sure to make a point of exploring the market fit before doing any development. So we, rather than, hey, I've got this idea, I think it would help improve women's health, let's just build it. It was, hey, let me talk to a few hundred women to see where they think the gaps are and then build for that. So not every entrepreneur does that. And I do think it helps you achieve success a little faster because then you're not testing the market after you've invested your time and money in building out something that it might miss the mark, right? Um, so from there, with that user feedback, developed the product, and then did some early beta testing, right? It is an application, a mobile application. Getting user feedback, it was relatively regimented in survey distribution, making sure that we're collecting consistent feedback, capturing how users actually interact with the user interface, things like that. And then we're almost published on the App Store, actually. So we're very close to our official launch, which is quite quick as far as from May to now. And once we're live on there, I think we'll be really pushing that in the market. We have a number of segments that we're targeting, and we're going to see sort of which picks it up the quickest and go from there. So it's been a fast and furious journey. We've got a few thousand people signed up on the wait list. So it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, no, that sounds like, yeah, 3 months. That seems like a lot of progress. 3 months or so, May, June, July, a few more. But either way, yeah, very early, and it seems like, yeah, you're on the right track for sure. I was curious, since you mentioned what specific markets we're targeting. So I was curious, like, what growth channels are working best for you.
Yeah, for sure. So Um, I'll focus on the direct to consumer because that's sort of the phase that we're at. Growth channels for this type of product, especially in the early stage, I'm actually finding word of mouth to be the quickest. When people believe in your mission and what you're building for, and you're tackling a pain point that they're experiencing, they are all over talking about it. So I've spent a lot of time networking, chatting with people either in or not in the medical space, because the user is just any lady, any person. So yeah, I'd say networking and in-person events have been very helpful. Some social marketing, I find once you start going down that path, it's making sure that the ads are appropriate for the different ICPs that you've got. So if we're, speaking with our student population, we're advertising to them on TikTok. If we're speaking about more of those that are in sort of the depths of fertility and parenthood, they're spending a little bit more of their time on Instagram typically. Those in perimenopause, maybe they're more on Facebook. So having the various channels on social with the right messaging for those different groups has also helped us a lot.
Gotcha. And how, I'm curious, was it just trial and error? Is it putting out ads or marketing on those different platforms and seeing, hey, like, what gets the most traction? Like, what did that process look like for
Yeah,
you?
I think marketing is always about experimentation, and you would be silly to think that you could design the perfect experiment on the first try and just throw it out there and it would work. There's always room for improvement, right? So definitely a lot of testing, a lot of A/B testing, a lot of testing different channels, seeing what people gravitate towards. Um, but again, like that word of mouth is has been really key for us in this early stage. And I think if you find the people who are your champions early on, it makes the growth so much easier.
Yeah, I think that's the case with almost any business.
Mhm.
It's, if you have early, positive reviews and have people that really believe in your product, then yeah, it makes it a little bit easier to kind of get things, rolling and kind of have that exponential growth that I'm sure you are looking for. So awesome. On the flip side of growth, I was curious what the toughest parts of getting your product or products into the hands of those ideal consumers has been. So I know you talked about, marketing and word of mouth being the best, but are there any other challenges specifically that you're like, this is really kind of a burden for us or something we've struggled with?
Yeah. So, again, we're relatively early stage on with the Hersay stuff, but I think with it being a direct to consumer play at this point, all of my experience is in B2B, and so this is new territory for me. And what I found really interesting is the buyers are really flaky. Like anybody will sign up for an app trial. Anyone will pay a few, not anybody, but people are willing to pay a few dollars to test something out. But that doesn't mean that they're going to convert to like regular recurring revenue. And I think the churn happens a lot more frequently and a lot faster. So I think keeping that user engagement on the direct to consumer side will probably be one of our bigger challenges in just setting up the app in such a way that it rewards the consumer for repeat business, whether that's through, hey, you're getting the outcomes and the treatment that you wanted or other things, right? Um, on the B2B side with Exera, the challenges there, we didn't talk about the successes, but the challenges um, right now, of course, everybody's struggling with the current state of the economy, right? Um, and being an HR tech tool, HR tends to be at the bottom of the list when it comes to budget, right? Um, Revenue generating is always priority, and HR is seen as a cost center. So, what I found there in the B2B side is because we're not positioning ourselves as a workforce optimization tool where we're um, that's my not looking to help people determine how to make cuts in their workforce and things like that. I think it's a little bit difficult to sell in the market that we're in right now, um, just given like the industry and the customer that we're selling to. um, we
Do
could
you
look
feel
at.
like
Sorry,
it's,
go ahead.
sorry to cut you off. Do you feel like that's more of an outreach and finding leads, or do you feel like it's more of a, hey, the people aren't interested, maybe after going through the conversations and just realizing like, hey, maybe it's not the right fit or it doesn't have enough value for us to move forward?
There's a few things. So one, HR isn't often a decision maker. They don't hold the purse strings.
Yeah, fair.
So they may be an influencer, but they're often not the ones who are signing off. So that's always a challenge when you add more layers into your sales cycle there. Um, Another challenge is the buyers may be interested in the technology, but they don't have the budget. They're reducing their HR budget right now. They're laying off their workforce. A lot of organizations are putting their stock in AI. That's going to be this magic wand that cuts their, their labor costs and all of that. But um, I think that there's sweeping changes being made without actually investigating the practicality of what that looks like. Um, if you don't have robust systems in place to manage the work right now, as in if you're not already automating that, it's going to be really difficult to automate when you don't have the people there to train the models, like, among other things. So, yeah, I would say that a lot of it has to do with like sort of the economy and where people are a little hesitant to invest in workforce tools right now, not knowing what the implications are of the people side. But at the same time, HR is traditionally quite a difficult industry or level to sell into, just because they tend to be influencers rather than decision makers.
Gotcha. And I was just curious on like the ideal customer for you on the HR side of you saying, hey, it's a little bit more difficult space to sell in. Is it small businesses? Is it businesses with like a couple people? Is it, medium sized businesses, large corporations? Like what is, I
Yeah.
guess, the ideal client and where has a lot of your business come from?
Yeah. So definitely the mid-market, those organizations not only, have the budget, but they have enough information data to tap into, right? So they've got their tools and they're already tracking some information, just usually not super effectively. Um, they're often looking for ways to innovate so that they can continue to grow into the large and enterprise space. I would say like actual like vertical or industry wise, those that are looking to make change and or are like more innovative in their adoption of newer technologies as well tend to be a little bit successful. But, like we've had conversations as well with clients on, in financial industry, for example, or others that maybe traditionally don't have the reputation for being fast moving or innovative as well.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Just a couple more questions for you, and then we'll get you out of here. Um, but I was curious. So, as a company that it feels like, especially with Hersay, you're innovating and moving pretty fast. Just curious over the next, 3 months, quarter or so, what your top priorities are for yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, so once we've got that app launched, it's really getting as many users on the app as possible. So the next quarter is going to look like I don't know how many talks. I've got a lot of events in October, so set up to drive that engagement with our ideal customers, and really just all hands on deck for selling that as much as we can and as quickly as we can. Um, After that, we'll focus on the B2B side, but I think building the direct to consumer audience is key in the short term.
Appreciate it. Um, Curious, like in regards to like scaling your go-to-market efforts, any like biggest opportunities that you see or risks? I feel like opportunities is more exciting to talk about, but if you had any risks that you thought, hey, that's a big one we're dealing with, again, in relation to like your go-to-market strategy, anything comes to mind that you wanted to share?
Yeah, so opportunities, there's like when we did that early market research, there was such an appetite for our tool across a lot of the world actually. Yeah, we tested in about 6 countries, 7 countries, and all had exponentially positive market signals. So that's really exciting. So I think what we'll need to consider in our go to market is how do we either adapt the platform or tool itself for the needs of the various audiences if they differ. And again, our risk is also in the compliance aspect for data privacy and security. So we are building to ensure that we are compliant with HIPAA, GDPR, like all of that fun stuff when it comes to data privacy and security. But the more countries you enter, the more you need to factor that in, right? So it's not necessarily a roadblock. It's more just a lot of time and effort spent for the right reasons on ensuring that we're compliant as we go to market and scale.
For sure. Yeah, that actually just gets me thinking of like, hey, yeah, you might have different countries and different languages to deal with for the app. That's just a simple one that I'm thinking of. But also, yeah, it's like if you have, maybe women in a third world country where they don't have as good of access to medical care and questions, it's like it might be very helpful for them to be able to proactively get information from you and your app. Uh,
Yeah,
so yeah, just
absolutely.
those are just like thoughts that while you were talking, I was like, oh, it actually has even more positive use cases that again
Absolutely.
I'm just learning about Hersey from you today. It's yeah, very interesting for me to kind of rack my brain around. Cool. And last question I like to ask everybody. Hypothetically, if you had kind of a magic wand to fix one thing in your business right now that's either holding you back or slowing you down from getting you where you want to go, what would that thing be for
Yeah. So I think that's a really good question. Slowing us down with Hersey is getting published on the App Store. I didn't realize was such a challenge. There's a lot of back and forth with Apple developers. There's a long list of compliance. Um, Sort of like documents that you need to make sure that you're meeting the requirements of. So that's been a challenge of ours, not having gone through that process in the past. But every developer we talk to is just like, oh yeah, that's you're initiated now. Like that's just how it is. So yeah, that's once we work through the little bit of the end of that, I think we'll be in good shape.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I used to work for a small startup with like 40 to 60 employees or so. And I remember we'd go through the, app updates, and even just the updates to the App Store were like, they weren't like, hey, we're pushing them, they're approved. It was send them to Apple, wait for the update to get approved. Sounds good. And that, yeah, I just, in my head, oh, that's an easy process and takes, 12 hours or
Yeah.
something, turn around next business day, you're good. But in reality, that's not the case. Cool. Anything, I guess, on the Xera side that comes to mind for that same question?
Yeah, I mean, for Xera, I think it's more finding meeting the ideal customer where they're at right now. It's a really challenging time in the market, and everybody's struggling a lot. And so, how can we sort of come to a collaborative approach to how we can support them while also sustaining as a business? That's kind of the challenge that we're at right now in our continuous go-to-market strategy. But I'm confident over the next couple months things will warm up a little bit.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, yeah, you'll continue to deal with challenges, and that's part of life and part of business that you'll, figure out how to solve them. So,
Absolutely.
awesome. I did just want to, I guess, give you a chance if there's any advice that you had for founders, product leaders, anybody, that the podcast will be shared to or will listen. Any advice you'd give them about integrating AI into their product development process or businesses?
Yeah, I would say be really thoughtful about the way that you integrate AI. It's definitely not like you don't treat it as a band-aid, don't throw it on everything for the sake of doing it. Make sure that if you're integrating it, do it with a purpose. You'll get the most value out of the tool that way, and you'll spend a lot less time trying to configure things that may not work for your use case, right? So yeah, make sure that you understand what you're implementing and do that thoughtfully.
Cool. Good advice. And then just for you, just curious if you wanted to share where people can learn more about Xera or Hersay or get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so Rebecca Lynn Lyons. Hersay's website is www.hersay.ca, and Exera Solutions is exerasolutions.com. So
Perfect. And I'll do you a favor and throw those links in when I publish it. Uh,
amazing. Thank you.
yeah, definitely. But awesome. That, I think, kind of wraps it up for me. I don't know if you had any other questions for me or anything else you wanted to share.
No, I don't think so. That was great.